No, for real, that is a stuffed cat. Like a creepy looking stuffed cat. Are you ready for the next episode of Smalls That Sell and Making Money with Woodworking? And for those of you that are new to this series and wondering what it's all about taking what's hot and trending in the big box stores, being able to put our own twist to it, and then make our versions of these low cost, high profit items. And I've found a ton of new great ideas. So let's go ahead and hop into this first one. Okay, so this first one caught my eye because it would be super easy to make with basic tools, and it's pretty cool. And that's going to be this rustic old world corbel or corbel. I think it's corbel. For some reason, if it's corbel, somebody let me know, but I'm just going to call it a corbel. It might get on your nerves a little bit if I'm saying it wrong. So these corbels were originally found in old construction, and they were used as load-bearing brackets. You'll see them a lot on very old houses and structures, but over the years, a lot of those ornate structural pieces have become obsolete, but people still love to decorate with them. So what's cool about these old corbels is that they can be used for several different ways in decorating. So you could use them as bookends, fall supports, door stoppers, really whatever that you would like. And they would be super neat in any of those settings. So they are wanting $35 for the 7x6x17.5 corbel, and honestly, that's really a fair price. But the great thing about this item is that you can make this for a little over a couple of bucks. First, let's talk about this design here. So I'm going to separate this up into like the top part and what I'm going to call the base, even though when it's flipped upside down and actually used as a bracket, the base would be the top. But the flat part, I'm going to call the base. So the actual top part of this, or the designed part, all that they have done is taken two boards that were 1.5 inches thick, joined those together to make the thickness for this thing. And what do we all have access to with those dimensions? 2x material. So for this, I would actually use a 2x6. Yes, the depth of this thing is 7 inches deep, and a 2x6 is only 5.5 inches wide, but that is accounting for this base. And that base sticks out 1.5 inches from the bottom, giving you 7 inches. Now they've obviously made this cut using a bandsaw. So if you have a bandsaw, you'll just glue a couple of 18-inch boards together to cut this out. But the majority of people out there watching do not have a bandsaw. And the great thing is about the way that this was constructed, all that you have to do is use a jigsaw, cut two parts, glue those two pieces together, do a little bit of sanding, and bam, you have the decorative part of this corbel. So this is going to be one of those things that you're going to have to believe in yourself. This is not a hard design to draw. I cannot draw hardly anything. But get creative and make a template. So just use some 1/4 inch plywood and start sketching out this design. If you do not want to just freehand this, then just take a super thin board and make your arches like I've shown you in a couple of other videos. As long as you're using a pencil, just erase anything that you're not happy with until you are happy with it. Once you get the shape that you're happy with, cut that out with a jigsaw, and presto, you have your very own template. Key thing about templates is keep them. This is a very big template. You see I have a zip tie here for different parts. And you can actually see some old measurements and things like that on the back for whenever I was creating this template. The whole point is do whatever it takes to your template so you don't accidentally throw it out with the trash. I like to drill a hole in the top and throw a zip tie through there. Just tells me, hey, don't throw this away. Plus, I can also hang it on the walls. But now that you have your template, the rest is going to be jigsaw work. Just trace out your design twice onto your 2x6, then using your jigsaw with a pretty aggressive blade, go ahead and cut these out. Once you get those cut out, yes, they may have some rough edges. They may not match just exactly, but even if you're using a bandsaw, they're going to have some rough edges. So what I would do is glue and clamp those two pieces together. Then once they're dry, come back in with a sander and sand them both at the same time. That way that we ensure that both match. Go ahead and leave maybe 1/2 inch of extra room at the bottoms of these things. That way you can trim them up to square. So these are 17.5 inches tall. Go ahead and cut your boards at 18 inches. So now this is something that you're going to have to take into consideration whenever you're originally making your first template. The very bottom 1.5 inches of your design needs to be flush. And the reason for that is so in this next step, you're going to attach your 1.5 inch trim or the base to this thing. So for this 1.5 inch trim, that's all that they have done is taken a 1.5 inch board and ripped it down at 1.5 inches. Once you have your square trim stock, you'll measure up about 1/2 inch from one end, and then draw a 45-degree angle. Then you just set your table saw to 45 degrees and make this rip cut, giving you this trim. And then once you have your trim cut, you'll need 3 pieces, the 2 side pieces and the one in the front, 45-degree angles for anything that meets in the front, just a flush cut in the back. That way you have the back side of this that is full length and completely flush. And as far as the painting, distressing, different things like that, that is where your creativity is going to have to kick in. So you're going to have to learn some of these different techniques. And really the only way to learn these things is to try them. So personally, what I would do with this, paint the entire thing black. Let that dry, go over the top with some white paint, let that dry, then take some high-grade sandpaper, just kind of lightly hit this thing a little heavier in certain areas to bring out this black base color. Now that's just if you want this rustic white look, which actually, if you kind of reverse that and painting the entire thing black, hit it with some sandpaper, bringing out some of the natural colors of the wood, throw a little bit of urethane on that, I think that it would look pretty good in black. But again, it's just one of those things that you would have to test out and see what actually moves. And always keep in mind, it's not what you like, it's what the customer likes. And this next one really hit home with me, and it's this wooden picket planter box. So obviously you know the main reason why I love this thing. This is a super cool idea and would be a huge seller. So I made my own version of this, and I'm going to call it a fence picket caddy. This thing turned out awesome, and you guessed it, the entire thing is built out of fence pickets. So let me teach you how to make it. Okay, so to start with, I've taken a fence picket, cut 4 boards that were 14 inches long, then I ripped those down to 4 inches wide. I'm going to be using these for my 2 ends. Since I want the width of this basket right around 8 inches, I'm going to join these boards together to make 2 different panels. And to do that, I'm going to be using the 720 to throw some pocket holes into 2 of my boards. And for the spacing for these screws, I'm going to be cutting holes at 2 inches, 7 inches, and 12 inches. And as always, I'm about to teach you how to make this super cool little basket. But if you're a plans in the hand type of person, head on over to my website. I'll make sure to throw a link in the description. Next, I'm going to join my boards together to make my side panels. For this, I'll be using wood glue and 1-inch pocket hole screws. The next parts that we're going to be needing, again cut from fence pickets, are 1.5 inch by 14 inch long boards. We're going to be needing 9 of these. Now these are going to be what we're going to be using to make our little mini fence pickets. So you may be wondering, why do we need these 14 inches long? The final parts that we're going to be needing will be just a little less than 7 inches long, but since I'm going to be putting some dog ears on these, I want to keep my hands as far away from the saw as possible. So to put the dog ears on these, I'm going to separate these up into a couple of different stacks. Then on the ends of my top boards, I'm going to measure in 3/8 of an inch on each side. Once I have that marked, with my miter saw set at 45 degrees, we'll make those cuts. Once you have your 45s on all corners of all of your boards, now we just need to cut these in half. So we'll measure down 7 inches and do just that. Alright, so now our 9 14-inch boards has turned into 18 little mini fence pickets. I'm really digging this project. So before we go any further, let's go ahead and get our design cut out onto our end boards. First point's going to be the center of the top. Since we joined 2 boards that were the same width, it's just going to be at that joint. The next point that we need to mark is 7 inches down from the top. That's where I want my box to start. I'm going to mark this on both sides. Now that we have that, we need to decide how wide we want the arched part of this. And that can be completely up to you. But I'd like the top of mine to be right around 2 inches, so I'm just going to use a 2-inch magnet that I have. You can really use about anything. Then I'm just going to trace out the top of my circle. Next, we need to make an arc from the edge of our circle going all the way down to our 7-inch mark. I've shown you a couple of different ways to make arches in the past, and even a handy little jig in the last tips and tricks video. If you haven't seen that, make sure to check that out. So I'm going to show you another way to get our arch. That's just putting a screw in a piece of scrap wood. And you're also going to be needing a thin, flexible piece of scrap wood. I'm going to place my panel against my screw with my scrap wood against it and line it up at an angle where it meets the edge of my half circle. Now that's all that I'm going to do is put some pressure in the center and then bend the back out to my 7-inch mark. Now this is where your creativity comes in. You can put as much of an arch in this as you would like. Once you get it to where you want it, just trace this out. And if you don't like it, just erase it and try it again. Or if you'd like to use the chain or the painter's tape trick that I've showed you in other videos, this would be a perfect project for that as well. And if you're just not comfortable drawing arches and circles, I'll make sure to throw a template in the plans. Once we have our side designs, let's go and get these cut out. But for this, I'm just going to be using a jigsaw with a scroll blade. If you're curious about what the difference is between a regular jigsaw blade and a scroll blade, a scroll blade just has more teeth. Yes, it'll make your cutting a bit more slow, but it's going to leave you with a lot cleaner cut. I'll just sand this up a little bit and use it as the template for my second side. So next we need to make our 2 side panels. And for this we'll be needing our little mini pickets. We're also going to be needing 4 parts that are around 7/8 of an inch wide by 13 3/4 of an inch long. We're going to start off by laying these out against something square. If you're going to be mass producing these things, this would be the perfect time for a jig. Even though I'm not going to be making a full jig, after I get 9 of my pickets laid out, I'm going to be using some more scrap material as spacers. Each one of these are 1/8 of an inch thick. Whenever I install my spacers, I'm going to make sure to leave a little extra room at the bottom. This is going to be for one of our support rails. So I want my support rail to be 1 inch from the bottom of my picket and 1/2 of an inch in from each edge. Once I have this into place, I'm just going to trace out my rail and then add some wood glue. Now with my rail back in place, I'm going to fasten this down using 7/8 brad nails. Now with my bottom secure, I'm just going to pull all of my spacers out to the end. I'll just measure 1 inch down from the top on my 2 outer boards. I'll line my top rail up with those marks, trace this out, add some wood glue, and then fasten the top rail. And you don't have to use brad nails for this. If you have a crown stapler, this would be the perfect time to use it. We'll just repeat this for our second side, and we'll start putting this thing together. And now, we have a mini picket fence. How cool is that? Howdy ho, neighbor. Now let's attach our sides to our ends. So with my ends on their edge with the screws facing in, I'm going to start by putting a bead of glue on each exposed edge. And remember that extra space that we left on the ends of our supports? That's going to fit right over the top of our end boards. With the bottom of our sides flush with the bottom of our end boards, I'm going to throw in some brad nails. And then we'll do this for our opposite side. Now, I'll probably end up coming back and throwing in some screws just for extra support. But that's completely up to you. It's really going to depend on what you're planning on using this for. If it's just going to be for decoration, brad nails will be just fine. Okay, so now that we have the main frame of this thing put together, let's go ahead and add in our bottom and our handle, and then we're done. For the bottom of this, we have 13 3/4 of an inch of area to fill. And how you do that is up to you. I'm going to go ahead and put in a solid bottom using 2 5 1/4 inch boards that are 8 inches long and 1 3 1/4 inch board that's 8 inches long. But if you'd rather put in strips or slats or whatever that you would like, really the only important measurement is the 8-inch length. And I'm installing these directly onto the bottom of the bottom rail. I'm using wood glue and brad nails, but since this is the bottom and really needs extra support, I'm going to go ahead and throw in some screws. And again, whether you decide to put in screws or not, it's completely up to you. You could actually put these boards on the inside resting on top of the bottom rail and really not need any at all. But then you'll be losing about 1 inch of your depth. Again, it's all going to come down to what you're using this for. If you decide to throw screws in, make sure to pre-drill and counterbore. Huge shout out to the Patreon community for making this channel possible. If you're interested in supporting the channel or finding out what this community is all about, stop by and check it out. I'll make sure to throw a link on my website and in the description. And for our handle, we'll need a board that's 13 3/4 of an inch long by 1 inch wide. Then about 1 inch from each edge, I'm just going to sand down these sharp corners. It's going to give it more of a worn look. Or if you want a completely round look, just use some dowel rod. Once you have your handle the way that you want it, let's throw some wood glue on the ends and then just slide it in place centered with our 2 end boards. Once I have it where I want it, I'm going to throw a couple of brad nails on each end and then put a screw in the middle. And with just a little bit of creativity and a couple of fence pickets, this is what we end up with. This super cool fence picket basket. So I hope that you like this idea as much as I did, and these super awesome little mini fence pickets. And if you decide to make these to sell, make several different versions. So do a solid wood version just like this. Also do the whitewashed paint look. After all, old fences are actually kind of known for that look. And then once you have it painted, stained, whatever that you would like to do, comes the staging. Now this is going to be key for this. Stage it different ways. So we're going to have the floral designs and things like that. You could also build up the bottom, put some fake eggs, really anything that is farmhouse related. And also stage it up as using it as outside decor. But regardless of whether you make these things for yourself or to sell, they're actually really cool and really handy. So here's one of the next things that caught my eye. It's this blanket ladder. And yes, we have talked about ladders in the past, and we will talk about ladders in the future because there's a ton of different designs for these things. You go to any of the sites like the OPB and just type in wooden ladder, you're going to find a ton of different styles. And the reason why this one caught my eye is because it is so simple to build. They're just calling this a natural wood ladder. It's 18 inches wide and 77 inches tall. And they are wanting $136 for this. Now they also made sure to put a disclaimer in there that this is for decoration only and to not use it as a ladder. And the reason for that is that all of these rungs are just one by material that they have used a brad nailer or a stapler and attached them on from the back. It was that simple for them to make this. So they're trying to make this thing look like an old ladder that you would find in a barn somewhere. One thing that they did do that I'm going to give them props for is making the top and bottom rung longer than the rest. So they used to do that on these old barn ladders. That way that the top rung would actually hook and sit onto the ledge of the loft and give you a little bit of a handle as you're climbing up. Yes, I played in a lot of old barns whenever I was a kid. But other than that, this is a super basic ladder that is intended to look super primitive. Now check this next one out. Now this one is on the opposite end of the spectrum here. Yes, it's still super easy to make, but this is not made to look super rustic and primitive. They are simply calling this a 5-foot blanket ladder. I'm going to call this the mysterious bad marketing ladder. And I'll explain a little bit more about that here in a minute. But there's several things going on with this ladder that I have no clue where it came from. But looking at the overall concept of this, it's supposed to be more of a modern rustic. And they're accomplishing this look by a nice clean white bottom and then just a natural wood top. So originally what caught my eye on this specific ladder is that I thought that in the center of this thing that they had designed it to actually break down for shipping. I thought that it would be a cool idea. But after I took a closer look at this, it's just painted this way. So if you decided to make something like this, I just use some 1x4 material for the sides and the rungs. So for the sides, that's all that they have done is put a 45-degree angle on the bottom of this ladder. That way that it will kind of sit against the wall. Then they put another longer angle at the top of this. I really do not think that that is needed, but I know why they did it. So that the sharp edges of the two sideboards don't make dents in the wall. The easier way to do that is just simply round over those back edges, but you do you. Again, this ladder is obviously 5 foot tall, according to the name, so we're going to be using 5-foot boards. As far as these rungs go, they're 18.5 inches long each. They're made out of the same material that they've used for the sides. Whenever they installed each one of these rungs, they just used wood glue and probably brad nails to give it a bit more of a different look, and also to help keep your blankets a little bit more square. They've installed each one of these at a 45-degree angle, which is actually not a bad idea for something that's intended for blanket storage or to hang towels on. So again, the overall look of this I really like, and I think will sell very well. Now to get into the weird stuff that I noticed about their marketing here. So it was awesome staging all the way through until they decided to throw this stuffed cat into the picture. No, for real, that is a stuffed cat, like a creepy looking stuffed cat. First of all, who stuffs a cat? And the next thing is, why would you use it in staging? It's creepy, like straight out of Pet Cemetery. It's bad. Do not use any type of stuffed critters that used to be alive in your staging. Just don't do it. It's not a good idea. PETA be coming, knocking on your door, all that stuff. Don't do it. Next thing is check out these screw holes. Okay, so they didn't use screws to put this thing together, but they wanted to make it look like that it was assembled with plugs. So you see all these black dots that are going down the side of this ladder? That's just paint. But check out where they're at, okay? So these fake dowels are like in the middle of rungs, whereas they should be where the rungs meet up with the board. Well, I thought that was super weird, not as weird as that cat, but it's something that someone should have caught before putting this out. And then the last thing, this is the magic part of this ladder. Even though it comes with the creepy cat, I think I'm going to buy one of these because it can float. If you look at the feet in this picture, they are not touching the ground. You can see baseboard behind them. This ladder is floating. It's supposed to be angled against the wall, and it's still floating. It's not attached to the wall. Someone did some bad photoshopping and cropping on this and made a floating ladder. Who knows? Maybe the rugs fly too. I'll let you know whenever I get mine in. Okay, so this next one caught my eye because it is something that we have talked about in the past. And that is whenever you have something that is hot, that is trending, and you know that that style is still going to be in, and you want to change it up a bit by turning one popular design into a new design. That's exactly what they've done here with these cookbook holders. We've talked about the cookbook holders in the past, but I noticed that they have done something different with these, and you should too, in the advertising part. It's not just a cookbook holder, but it's also a tablet holder. So they have realized that probably 50% of the people that cook are using a cookbook and the other half are using tablets. So essentially by putting both of those words into the name, they have created two products. But besides that, the big thing that caught my eye is the design for this. So they have taken the farmhouse cutting board design with the handle and actually left that on to make this cookbook holder, which is a pretty cool idea. And who knows, they may have had a bunch of old cutting boards laying around that they couldn't sell. Somebody came up with the bright idea of making a couple of cuts on the end, and bam, we have a totally new product that is now on the trending list. And that's the type of mindset that you need to have whenever it comes to making money with woodworking, running a side hustle or a business. I get tons of messages from people that are having trouble selling something in one area, whereas a couple of 100 miles away, they're selling like crazy and they cannot make them fast enough. So that is the type of situation where you would have to adapt. If a particular item, let's say you're trying to sell cutting boards, the market is saturated in your area, shake it up just like this and make a new item that no one else in your area is selling. Obviously, you know how they have made these things. You can make cutting boards several different ways. Again, these are the farmhouse style of cutting boards, so they're very roughly put together. And like this one, it had no intention of ever being a cutting board because it's only about 1/2 inch thick, and it looks like that it's made out of pallet wood. Actually, in the description of this one, it says made of reclaimed pine. So it's a pallet. They just threw a couple of boards across the back, threw a couple brad nails in there, some wood glue, cut out this handle shape at the top, threw a piece of rope in. Then they've cut a couple of 2-inch strips from the bottom of this thing, take the front and the bookrest part of this. And to get that little circle notch, you can just do that with a jigsaw, or if you're making several of these, just take a board, drill a hole through the middle, rip that in half, and you'll have an extra front piece ready to go for your next one. Then they just whitewash the top of this, and whenever I say whitewash, just thin down some paint. You want to be able to see the wood underneath. And they're not using like painter's tape for a nice crisp line. This is a rustic look, and looks pretty good. Now they're actually using a wire backing to hold this at that angle. If you take a look at this one, they've just taken a 1-inch board and put what looks like maybe a 15-degree angle on each end, and then just attached it to the board. If it were me for attaching this, I would just get a 1-inch hinge. You can get like 100 of them for dirt cheap on Amazon, and actually put that hinge underneath and attach it to the back of the cutting board. That way that the stand part can fold in, but it will only allow it to go so far out so it doesn't slide and go flat. And it would give an even more of that rustic look. Now they're selling these things for 36 bucks a piece, and I think that they are pretty much spot on, especially for the one that's made out of pallet wood. Again, it's going to be one of those things where you'll have to make a couple and a couple of different designs, test your area, and decide what your price point needs to be. So if you've seen anything in this video or any of my previous videos that you would like to make, but you're just not sure where to start or comfortable with certain tools, make sure to check out my woodworking kickstart course from novice to natural. Even if you have never picked up a tool in your life, or you're an intermediate woodworker that is looking to advance their skills, this is for you. This sounds like it's something for you or someone that you know. You can learn all about it on my website, and I look forward to seeing you on the inside. So I've just given you several different new ideas for you to put your own twist to. Now it's time for you to do your part, and you know what that is. Get up, get out, and make something.